Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our monthly meeting. As you know, usually we're meeting on Wednesdays, but because it is really tough for legal practitioners to meet on Wednesday due to the court calendar, we had to switch it to Thursday. I'm Francisca Blanc. I'm with Utah Housing Coalition. Welcome. I would like to ask you that if you have any questions for the panelists, to place the questions in the Q&A, not in the chat. It will be much easier for me and for my colleague Yehemi to answer the questions live. And now I would like to introduce my colleague Yehemi, the program manager with Utah Housing Coalition.
Hello, everyone. Yehemi Zavala Orozco here at the Utah Housing Coalition. My pronouns are they, them, and I am very honored today to be part of this amazing conversation about eviction expungement with amazing leaders in the community. So I am just going to provide their names and their where they come from, and they are going to talk a little bit more about how amazing they are in their work in the field. And first we have Tolina Catao from Pictar. The second panelist is going to be Daniel Stevenson, which is the Executive Director of People's Legal Aid. Then we have Pamela Beats, which is the Executive Director of Access to Justice. And we have Plessy Wyas from the Self-Help Center from the Utah Courts. So I am going to let them first to introduce themselves, and then we're going to start with the amazing conversation, if this is okay. Let's start with Danielle.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Stevens. I'm the Executive Director of People's Legal Aid. We are a 2-year-old nonprofit law firm providing free education and legal advice to Utahns with housing issues, as well as low or no cost eviction and debt defense.
Pamela.
Hello, I'm Pamela Beats, and the Access to Justice Office is part of the Utah State Bar. And so our primary objective is to ensure that we have lawyers doing pro bono services. They participate with brief advice and limited scope representation, as well as full representation cases in partnership with Utah Legal Services. And so we are a connection point between our lawyers, training them, getting them ready, and connecting them with the community so that we can make sure that all Utahns are able to have access to equal justice. Thank you.
Plessy.
Hello, I'm Plessy Wyas. I'm one of the staff attorneys with the Utah Court Self-Help Center. The Self-Help Center is a free service to help people navigate the state court systems. So people, especially those without attorneys, can reach out to us by email, text, or phone. We provide information and help people to navigate the website, the court website, and the forms. We don't provide legal advice or represent people, but help people to try and navigate the systems themselves and to refer to people to the community partners and resources that are available.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Tolina Catao from Pictar.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for my technical issues at this moment. My name is Tolina Catoa. I am a CHW, which is a community health worker out here in Salt Lake County. What we do is we assist families all across that and provide resources and network. Our biggest issue at this moment is housing. So this is a good thing that we're having here, and I'm grateful to be here.
Yay. Thank you, Tolina. So today we're going to speak, we're going to speak about what it is, expungement, how does that work? And especially we're going to talk about evictions because right now we were able to, to work with different leaders in the community and being able to pass legislation that is going to relieve some of the families that are with the burden of, having an eviction in the record. We know that this is something very difficult for families, and especially because we passed this amazing piece of legislation, we thought that it was very important for us to provide you with the guidance that is needed. And also, we are going to touch base in basic topics and basic information, because some of you are new to our network, and we are super happy to have you here. We are very excited that there is many people right now listening to our conversation, and so we just want to make sure that everybody has the same terminology, everybody has the same knowledge, and we can continue the conversation with no problems. As Francisca mentioned, I'm going to emphasize that if you have any questions, please submit it through the via Q&A, and we will be happy to respond them. I think that we make the time to do it, and also, I have the list of the most common questions, so probably some of those questions are going to be responded, and if not, we will finalize them at the end of the conversation. So we're going to start with the first question, and this goes for Danielle. If you could tell me, what is expungement?
Yes, expungement is a legal process through which a civil or criminal issue that someone has on their record can be removed from that record, so that it's no longer part of the court record, no longer visible to people looking for or doing background checks on people. It is very commonly associated with the criminal justice system and people having their records expunged for criminal matters. But there are some civil expungements, which is where eviction expungement falls.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So following up with that, if you could explain us what eviction is, and also if you could explain us why it's so important, or why it's important for us to talk about it right now.
Absolutely. Eviction is also a legal process through which landlords work with the courts and sometimes opposing counsel for people who are representing tenants to be essentially reclaim full control of the property that they own and that tenant has been residing in. Eviction matters are dictated by state law, and the frequency and the process, how quick it happens, is all dictated by statute. And it's really important because evictions displace people from their homes, and in a housing market like Utah's, where there's very low vacancy and rents continue to rise, being evicted can make it even harder to find alternative housing when you are removed from a property.
And we have seen many cases right now, right, Danielle? We have meetings every 2 weeks where we discuss about these issues, and we have seen increase in evictions throughout these months because of what is happening. And so, Pamela, this question goes for you. What is the expungement of an eviction, specifically in Utah?
So in the past, there was not a mechanism for an expungement of an eviction. Tenants could try to get it off their record through other court rules, but there wasn't a statute that laid out a process that would specifically allow for that eviction to be expunged in the process that Danielle mentioned. And now that we have that, there are specific paths that can be taken to get an expungement, depending, of course, on the circumstances and the timing of the eviction. But in effect, now that we have a state statute governing the process, it is very clear that evictions can be expunged and that there are mechanisms in place for the court to do so.
So, if I'm understanding, then an eviction of an expungement, no, an expungement of an eviction. It means that my record can be erased if I petition at this moment in time in the state of Utah, correct?
So there are 3 paths that you can take to have a eviction expunged. And as long as you take one of those paths, it can be completely wiped away from your record. It is no longer something that you have to report or acknowledge. It is completely blotted out once it's approved by the court.
That is very awesome. And this question then will go to Plessy. And this is because I know that you work with the court and with the Self-Help Center. And I want to ask you, how do I request the expungement of a client's eviction, especially if I am not the person who's been evicted, but I am a community organizer or I am a community health worker? How can I support my client, and where could I go to get this process started?
Sorry, I had my mute button covered. Is it possible for me to share my screen? How do I do that? Oh, share screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Great. So this is the court website. So there's a lot of great resources on this page. The web address for this is www.utcourts.gov that you can see here at the top. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. The screen maybe. So this is the court web page. And when you come to this court web page, I want to highlight a few things, but take us to the resources on expungement. So one thing before we go to the expungement page, over here in our Do section on the right is a resource called My Case. I'm just going to click on that for a moment, because this is something that's not just for expungement, but this is an important tool that people can use with expunging an eviction and also with other types of cases. So I want to make sure everyone's familiar with it. My Case is a free program of the courts for the parties in the case to be able to access the documents that have been filed in the case, to see if there's any hearings scheduled, to see the case summary, sometimes called the docket or case history. Right now, My Case is not for all case types, and that's going to be expanding. But for right now, it does include eviction cases. And actually, eviction cases, not only can you see the documents, but you can also file documents using My Case. So this is a free service that people can sign up for. And I'm going to be referring back to this in a minute, but I wanted to, on our path to the expungement page, stop there. So I'm going to go back to the home page. On our home page, there's lots of ways to get there, but one place is when we look under our self-help section, there's a link to housing. When you go there, you're going to see different resources that might be applicable to those that you're helping. If we look here under eviction and landlord-tenant issues, we have information about eviction for tenants, eviction for landlords, a flow chart of the process. But this fourth one here is what we're talking about today, the expunging eviction records. So if we open that up, here's our page about expungement, and it kind of helps with some of the great points that have been made previously. If you weren't able to write all that down, like there are some explanations here that you can go to about what is an expungement. And it has a section kind of to guide people to see with the different pathways that there are, what might apply. So this section, Can I Expunge, is kind of to lead people. You have to click on the plus. A lot of people don't realize, but you have to click on that and it gives you your sections and you can navigate that system. As you go down further in the page, it starts to talk about these processes and these options. So some, in a minute, we'll look at petitions, but some things can be expunged automatically. And so that's without there having to be a petition or hearing with the court. So here we explain that briefly. So if the entire case was, and this is for things that's, this law went into place in July of this year. So for cases from July of this year going forward, if the entire case is dismissed, there's no appeal pending. Once 3 years have passed, those cases will automatically come off the court record. The next option is it can be that the parties can agree. So the landlord and the tenant can agree to an expungement and file a stipulation with the court that says that. And then based on that alone, the system and the court can remove that record or expunge that record. So that explains here. There's also a different pathway, which is for filing a petition. So in this example, it's if you were evicted for non-payment of rent, so you didn't pay rent or stayed in the property after the lease expired and were evicted, then there's this petition process. If a judgment was entered against you, that may or may not happen, but it's common for a judgment to have entered against the tenant, then that does have to be satisfied for you to do this process. So as is common with many court processes, it can get complicated, right? Or there's different steps that have to be followed. So for this, again, I want to kind of take us on a quick detour. Sorry if I'm taking too much time, but I think it's important to show this page that we link to here about the satisfaction of judgment. So it talks, this is for landlords and tenants to see what you do if to show the court. Satisfaction of judgment would be to show the court you've paid. You were to pay a certain amount and the tenant has now paid that. The landlord will generally just file with the court to let them know that's happened. Sometimes if that doesn't happen, the person that owes the money, the tenant, can file forms with the court to have the court find that yes, it has been paid. So having their proof, that's important that they've kept their proof to show, like, here's receipts for the payments I made, or other ways that they can show that that's been paid, so that if they have to ask the court to find or to show that it's satisfied, they can do that. So I won't spend a lot of time looking at these forms, but we have forms there, and that's linked to from this page. Anytime you see different colors with the line or just a different color, the blue or orange, you can jump to that. So that's kind of a precursor. So some people aren't going to be ready yet to petition until they've completed that step. But once they are ready and it's applicable to do a petition, then this is where the person helping them could help direct them to the forms, to find the forms that need to be filled out. With all our court forms, we have them in PDF format. Unfortunately, it's not the fancy PDF that you can type in, but it is a document you could print and use blue or black ink to fill out, or you can open it as a Word document to type in it. I do recommend always coming back to the page, because as laws change or forms get updated, we update the website. And so versus just having a big folder, in your files of documents, if you just know to come to this page, you'll have the most current version of the forms. And so here we have those forms, the civil cover sheet, the petition, and the order. There is a filing fee for a petition to modify. That's $375. Not everyone is going to be able to afford that. However, the court does have a process to ask for a fee waiver, and I'm going to tell them we need the link up here too, but it's down here in the service one. It goes to how people can ask for a fee waiver. So if your client would qualify but can't afford that $375, they could try asking for a fee waiver, and that process has been somewhat simplified for people that receive public benefits, but even people that don't receive public benefits can fill out the forms, and it's based on income. So again, another rabbit hole to go down, but there's that information on the fees. How it works is that they fill out the forms, they file them with the court. That's by taking them into the court, mailing them to the court, or nowadays you can also do it by email to get the parties into the court. And then it will be the tenant's responsibility to have the landlord served. And we have more information on the ways that has to happen, but that's something that's often also difficult for an individual to do, that having the assistance, of community members that understand that process and the options can be helpful. And once they're served, you file that proof that they've been served. Then you have to see what happens next, as explained here. So if the tenant's asking and the landlord doesn't contest it, doesn't respond to fight that, the court has to wait 60 days, but then could grant that. So the landlord just doesn't do anything, it might be granted. Or if the landlord objects, they would file that with the court. Under the current legislation, if the landlord objects, the court would deny the request by the statute. And so that's kind of about how, and I think we might get into some of these questions for the group, so I won't steal the thunder of anyone else, but I'll just kind of scroll through it, that we do have some information about what happens here after the case is expunged. We try to have information on the website for as many of the parties to the case as we can. So in addition to asking for it, we also have the other side. If someone needs to object to that petition, there's a form here they can use. We have some ideas and things if people aren't eligible, but maybe the most important thing is the forms were linked to above, but as is the case, as you get familiar with the court website, the forms are always at the bottom of the page. So here again are those petition forms if you're doing the petition process. So
thank you, Plessy. Now that this is wonderful. This is exactly what I explained in my trainings, actually, how to navigate the court system. And we know, I am a promotor comunitario or a community health worker. I know that I'm not a lawyer. I know that I didn't went to law school, and I have a lot of questions, or I am ignorant in so many stuffs, especially in housing legal terminology. And so for you to provide this information for me as a community member or as a leader in the community, it actually helps me, and it guides me on how to utilize it properly, because I know that my community members, at least the ones that I work with, have a difficulty utilizing technology. And so, for you to have also the PDF formats or the Word documents, for me, it's very helpful because I can put it in paper and I can ask my clients to fill it out in pen or in a format that it can be erased, and then to put it in a correctly way. I think that is an empowerment way of doing these things, and I think that it's amazing. And for all of us that are listening, especially if you're a community advocate or a case manager or a community health worker, we know that we're not going to replace Pamela's position. We're not going to replace Danielle's position, but we can support and help our community members in a plain language that can be much easier. That is the main idea and the goal in this workshop and in this presentation that we are doing today. So thank you so much, Plessy, because this was very informative.
You're welcome. And I'll just add that as people are helping people, you can call us and email and text us. It doesn't just have to be the person. We get a lot of calls from the helpers that are the ones that can pull those forms or navigate the court website and get that. So never hesitate to reach out to us if you get stuck and you're not sure. A lot of it doesn't make sense. Court forms don't make sense, and we're happy. We can't give advice, but we're happy to explain what we can.
Thank you. Yes, and so I want to go back to Pamela right now, because I actually have a question in the chat that is the next question I have. You were mentioning about the 3 different pathways of expungement. Could you explain us a little bit about what that means, or those, and what are those 3 types, please?
Sure. So a lot of this is what we, saw and were just walked through with the court processes. But just to kind of summarize and keep the tracks in mind. So there are 3 different tracks laid out in the statute that was just approved. The first one is automatic expungement. These are things that happen if the case was completely dismissed, there's no appeal pending, and it's been at least 3 years since the eviction was filed, but it only went into effect this month. That means the first automatic evictions will not happen until 3 years from now. It's not an automatic quick thing. That's path 1, is automatic. Path 2, excuse me, is by petition. Excuse me. And so by petition, there's not this time limit of having to wait the 3 years from today, but it also can look back to the past. It's something that you can ask the court to do for 2 types of evictions. If it's non-payment of rent, or if the person stayed past the end of the term of their lease. If it's one of those 2 types of evictions, even if it's before July of this year, you can file a petition with the court. Again, any judgment that was entered has to be satisfied in order for you to do that petition. There is a filing fee, and you have several papers that you have to file. And that I think was walked through beautifully on the court forms of being able to find those. The key to a petition, so path 2, that petition is once you file the petition, you have to wait 60 days before it would be decided upon by the judge. And that 60-day period is so that the other side has the opportunity to object. If they object to that eviction, there's no other process. The court cannot expunge it. If they do not object, then the court will enter that it's expunged. So you have to file the right paperwork, you have to give notice to the other side, and you have to wait 60 days to give them time to object. So that's the second path. The third path is a stipulated expungement. And this is something that also isn't time limited. You don't have to wait the 3 years. You can look back to the past. Type 3 is really anything you agree to with the other side. So if you get it into a stipulated agreement that they agree to expunge the eviction, it will be expunged. There's not that same waiting period because both sides already have the opportunity to work together and talk through it. So those are the 3 types.
So can I give you the examples and you tell me if I'm correct in what I understood, Pamela?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one. So if I get evicted today, and that eviction gets into my record, but it was because I couldn't pay because I got COVID. In 3 years, that eviction can be expunged automatically?
As long as the requirements are there. So there's no appeal on it. The entire case was dismissed. As long as those key pieces are done, yes, it will be automatically expunged.
The second one is if I was evicted 2 years ago, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, because I got out of work and I couldn't pay my rent and whatever happened, then I can request my petition today. Right. And I can fill out the forms. I don't need to have a lawyer to do it. It's recommended to have the lawyer, but I can fill out the forms if I ask the self-help representation, correct?
Again, that's correct, as long as it meets the requirements of the statute, right? So that any judgment has been satisfied, you file everything, you give the other side notice, yes.
Okay, and the last one that you were mentioning is, for example, if last month my landlord filed a summons of eviction because I couldn't pay my rent, and then before my date in the court, I get into an arrangement with my landlord and I pay and satisfy what my landlord is requesting, that also can be expunged, right? That record that my landlord put can be expunged.
Yes, and that would be something where you would want to get that in that stipulated agreement. You would want it to say that the other side will not object to the expungement and that you've met the terms. You've satisfied anything that was owed, your payment plan works. If it's for a future time, so let's say you did a stipulated agreement, but there was a payment plan and the payment plan was going to take the next 6 months. You could still put in the stipulation that the eviction would be expunged as soon as that 6-month period occurred, as long as you kept the terms of the agreement.
Wonderful. I love it. I love it. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I am getting this information and it's really amazing. Thank you so much, Pamela. The next question that I have is, when is expungement prohibited? Would you like to answer the question, Pamela, or would you like to answer the question, Daniel?
I think Pamela should answer this one.
I'm going to say I'm happy to, or let you. There are times where there are types of evictions that are the type of eviction that the court and just public policy says people should know that this type of situation occurred. And so they are not eligible for automatic expungements. They're not something that you can do by petition, although depending on circumstances, you may still be able to get them expunged by stipulation. But these are things like evictions for nuisance or failure to comply with the rules of the apartment community. Usually they're things where you were a disruptive or a dangerous tenant, or you were using the property in a way that wasn't intended to be used. Maybe you were using it for a business, or you were trying to sublet. Those are things that public policy has said, we don't want those types of evictions to just be automatically expunged or done by petition. But again, if both sides agree to it in a stipulated agreement, then potentially it still could be, but it would be at the time the agreement was made.
I see. So for example, if how can I explain? Yeah, this example is actually great. If I fill out my petition of expungement because I had an eviction last month, and I submit the petition, I have to wait for 60 days until my landlord answers. If my landlord answers and says, no, I don't agree for this person to to take out or remove their eviction from the record, what could be the reasons for what they do? They can do it because they want to, or they have to follow also certain requirements for them to say the person cannot have expunged their eviction.
So right now, the way the law is written, there are not requirements. So they don't have to provide necessarily the reasons. It doesn't have to be for good cause. But I think that's something that's going to play out. I want to encourage everyone to remember that this is brand new. It hasn't been litigated. It's still going to play out how some of these things will be dealt with and handled and modified to be able to address that. But at least currently, the way the law is written, they just need to file an objection. The form is on the court's website that was shown, so you can see what type of form they would file and what types of things are required in that.
Thank you so much. So my next question is going to be to Danielle. Danielle, can you explain me what happened after the eviction was expunged?
Yes, and Pamela or Plessy, please correct me if I get this wrong. For the group, I am not actually an attorney, so very much in the boat that all of you are with learning how this works. But basically, after an eviction is expunged, it no longer shows up on your record. So for example, if you go to apply for housing at another rental property and they do a background check on you, that eviction won't be there.
What happened if it is?
I can't answer that.
No? Okay. Pamela, do you know? Like what happened if I did the process and everything happens, my eviction was supposed to be expunged, but what happened if my landlord checks that I do have an eviction or still shows in the record?
So again, this is one of those areas where it's brand new. and we're not sure. There is a process. So the court will publish a list of expunged evictions. Within 30 days of that list being published, tenant screening agencies are required to remove it from the database. They're required to remove it from any of their records. So if it's still showing, it would be something where you would start by communicating with them and showing them the list that the court published and asking them to remove it. If at that point it's still showing, the next steps are a little bit murky still. I would say it's like with anything else that you can, so if it was done by petition, you could do a motion to enforce to make sure that it was being done properly. You can also, take them to small claims to make them do what they've been told to do. But there is no clear process laid out in the statute of how to enforce that otherwise.
Thank you. And the reason I know that I was intentional with this question, Pamela, no malicious, promise. I wanted to bring into the conversation this because it's a new policy, because it's everything of this nature is so new. We are still figuring out many of the questions that we come up, or the circumstances or the struggles that we come up. And as you can see, even though there is things that we need to figure it out, there is room for improvement. And I want to emphasize that if there is room for improvement, I hope that you, and I am making you an invitation, you that are listening to us, you can let us know. You can let us know, or you can provide us with feedback once we are working in this, because nothing is perfect. But the reason that we are having this conversation is because we want to be transparent. We want to be as transparent as we can in terms of what we know, how it's going to move forward, and how this is benefiting at the end of the day, my community and the work that I do. And so with this, go ahead, Leslie.
I just wanted to add that I had that same question as I was thinking through this today. So hopefully some of those questions will be figured out over time, or things will be seen. I just wanted to mention, so I'll just share this really quickly. So here's the part on the court website that talks about the list that was mentioned, this public inquiry page. The tricky thing is that it's only there 90 days, and it only shows some limited information. Another thing is with automatic expungement, and this is for evictions, but also criminal expungements. When they're automatic, there's not a notice going out. So people's case could be expunged and they might not even know. They might be still telling people about it when they didn't know. That's a reason that I showed that My Case at the beginning. If you set up My Case in advance, then you can go back into it. And right now, if you go into it when you have a case, it shows the case and it shows all the documents. If you go into it once a case has been expunged, it lists it there to just show like the case, but like now all the stuff isn't there. And it's like your clue that it has been expunged, and that's how it's showing. So by utilizing My Case, when people have a case, it's a resource they can go back to see that it's been expunged. In addition to this web page that only has it only has 90 days, and I can really quickly, I think, show it up, pull it up to show you what it looked like. But let's look in this month, and so this is all very new, right? So we're not going to see a lot, but this is what pulls up here is just, you can see the case number, what court it was out of, when that case was started, when it was resolved or ended the case, and then it only gives the initials, like the last name and first name initials for the parties. So it's just a little bit of information there. But hopefully we will, as the courts and the different attorneys and community providers and our legislators look at this, hopefully we can get some clarity and additional improvements to the process to really serve the purpose of making this easier for tenants and not a barrier to them.
Thank you so much, Plessy. Franchi has a question, but before I go to Franchi, I am gonna tell you, Franchi, that now that you're here, I'm gonna make you a question.
Well,
Just let you
actually,
know.
I know that you're very excited. This is really good, but I want to follow up right after Plessy because it's related to that. So the courts were going to publish the reason the courts are publishing the expunged cases is because we, the advocates, we're going to take that information and we're going to share it with the tenants who receive it. So this will going to become a process of the advocacy component. But like Pamela said several times, you know, this is all new. So we're going to have to figure out quite a bit as we are, you know, we have to figure out, adapt, you know, how we're going to do this. So it's a work in progress, right? That's the most important part. So,
Now that
you know,
now that we have you here, Franchi, I do have a question. Can you explain a little bit what does that mean HB 0359, which is the expungement of eviction bill?
oh, so that's House Bill 359, which was sponsored in the House by Representative Marsha Judkins, and it was co-sponsored in the Senate by Senator Cullimore. And it was passed during this year legislative session, which meets for 45 days at the end of January and kind of ends in the first week of March. And Utah Housing Coalition has the organization that worked on it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who worked, all of the partners on that bill to become possible. And again, this is a work in progress. We have to see how things are happening in real life about it.
Thank you, Franchi. Then the next question is going to be, and I promise that is going to be my last question, and then we're going to the Q&A because we have to have time for people to respond the questions. This is for Tolina. You, Tolina, as a community health worker who's working with the community, how do you see that this will impact your community?
To be quite frank, I can see this being a positive thing as well as negative. And the only reason I say that is because not everybody in the community has access or will be able to understand the processes and all the steps. I guess like the 3 tracks, I get that, and how to do so. So it's just about helping, like, how do we make this information more clear for everybody in the communities that we work with, be able to access this and not be confused or not know who to come to, if that makes sense. So I see it's helpful, but at the same time, and I completely understand that this is new and I'm excited that it's here because it's definitely something that needs to be here. But it's just another loop and hoop that they have to jump through. Like the part that I didn't like and that I know a lot of people in the community will have an issue with as well is there's so many steps that the tenants have to take. And then I heard that landlords, there's not really much things that the landlords need to do besides just, you know, file back, and they don't have to give any reasons. Like they don't have to prove anything as to why the tenant, you know. So to me, that's just like, okay, so we have this step, great, this is amazing. But then at the same time, it's like we have this step, but still we're going to have to take so many more steps because the landlords, once again, have the upper hand when it comes to tenants, and it's really rough. From my opinion. But yeah, I see it's a great thing that's much needed. I was hoping, you know, that it wouldn't be so much in favor of landlords, because a lot of tenants do tend to get the raw end of the stick. And the 3 years, that's another thing that I also wanted to kind of like ask and highlight, if you don't mind, is I know that it takes 3 years. I heard it before for it to, you know, come off after everything's fine. But why does it take that long? But yeah, this is amazing, but at the same time, I just see so many hurdles because it's going to be difficult. So we just have to do better at getting the information out, sharing the knowledge, and helping to guide them through.
So, Tolina, the 3 years, it is for the automatic expungement of eviction. And I know that Pamela went through, so basically the tenant cannot own anything to the landlord, right? That's when you get the automatic expungement of eviction. And it doesn't have the differences between, oh, if it's petition, it's only for non-payment or end of lease agreement, So I think the challenging part, again, will be, to see how all this we're going to move forward, because this is happening for 1 month, right? And yeah,
Yes,
that's my answer.
and I completely agree with you, Tolina. This is a discussion that we have had several times with Francisca in our office, and I see it with the eyes of in the perspective of a community member, right? I do see these things. I do see these things as a community member's perspective, and we understand that this is something that is another step that our community members have to do. And so what I am doing here again, and I want to emphasize that all the people who is working as a service provider, community health workers or case managers that are seeing difficulties or problems, doing this process, let us know. Share with us the confusions or the frustrations that you are having, because that is the only way that we will know how to help or support the work that you are doing. So I will emphasize, please share your frustrations, share your stories, share the process and the time that it's taking you to do this work, or the time that your clients are taking to do this process for them to access to their home, right? And so I do want to emphasize this, and I want to make the invitation of it. So we are going to the chat and Q&A. And I thank you, Tolina, for your honesty, because that's exactly what we need right now. And I see in the questions that we have, we are going to answer this one, but I think that we answered part of this one. Is what are the difference between an eviction expungement and a criminal expungement? Is the eviction expungement designed to be easier to get and required to have fewer steps? Is the first question.
I think I'm happy to jump in on this. I think it's just important to remember that law is divided into criminal types of situations and civil actions. Criminal things you can be guilty for, you can have, fines and penalties of jail time attached. On the civil side, it's not about guilt or innocence, it's about liability. And so they're really just two different ways of looking at wrongs that people can do. There's not really a strong difference between expungement, other than is it covering a criminal type of action or a civil type of action. And so it's not necessarily easier. One's not easier or more difficult. There are fewer steps in that with criminal expungements, you have to go through your record, you have to produce documents and things that you don't have to do for evictions, but it's not by design easier. It's simply that it's a more specific, narrow issue that's been handled by the courts.
I see. Thank you.
And I would just add really quickly that.
Oh, you put yourself in mute.
Okay, here I am. So we know that criminal convictions can also be about a barrier to getting housing, right, as well. So it'd be good to do one of these about criminal evictions, and we have there's just different processes, and recently the clean slate laws that are making a lot of things being able to be expunged. So we have lots of information on the court website about that, and it'd be great to do something like this about that. I think it's also an issue for people trying to get housing.
So I am going to go to this one that I think it's nice and important to answer. Can an eviction be expunged that was VAWA related, even if fall under the prohibited eviction for expungement? I think that we are going to Pamela.
I was going to say, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I don't think we know what the ramifications of that are. You're talking about violence against women. It has its own separate statute, and the interplay between them is going to have to play out and be seen. But I think that the overall policy behind this is to protect people and to be able to allow them to stabilize their housing. So if this needs to be done by petition, if it needs to be done by stipulation, or if this is something that needs to be addressed in an amendment or clarified, those are all things that I think we need more data about it to really be able to speak to.
Yes, yes. So I want to continue with this follow-up question that I was mentioning, Pamela. I don't know who this person is, but they are saying landlords rely on background checks to make sure their potential tenants are responsible. How does this system protect them from clients who could be more likely to not stay up to date on rent? How are tenants proving they are more fiscally responsible in this process? I think that the answer was, I think that the question was answered by Tolina, if I'm not wrong, but would you like to add something to this?
I think all of the protections for landlords are in place in the statute. So things like, you know, the case has to have been dismissed, the judgment has to have been satisfied, putting in provisions so that nuisance evictions aren't just automatically expunged. All of those layers that are built into the statute are intended to protect landlords against tenants that are not stable or able to pay their rent. And so I think while it's easy to be concerned about that, and I think that's a real valid reason for landlords to say, whoa, wait a minute, there are actually many provisions in place for those protections.
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. And I think that I am going to ask you a last question. And I'm sorry for those that we couldn't answer your questions. I am going to save them. I have your information. If I have your information, we will be able to send you an email with the answer. But if not, you can call us or email us. Or we will put our information in the chat. This question says this. Can you talk about the circumstances when a landlord might object to expungement? How common is this, and what interest would a landlord have to object to?
I can speak to this a bit. Like answers to some of the other questions, because this system is so new, this law, it is really impossible to say and how this is going to shake out until we have more data. The majority of evictions in Utah occur due to failure to pay rent. But again, it's impossible to say ultimately how this is going to shake out. We just need more data, and time will tell. I can think of a potential hypothetical situation when this might happen. We have seen some cases at People's Legal Aid where the tenant that we were representing was being evicted because they assaulted other tenants. And at that point, you know, it's a public safety concern for everyone living on that property. So I could think of that as a hypothetical situation where a landlord might want to object to it, knowing that they could be a concern at any other properties they are living in.
And I just want to jump in and add, I mean, this law has only been in effect for a month, but I will say that we have already had on our pro se eviction calendar many situations where landlord council has been very willing to put these stipulations into agreements and to work with us for tenants that are sympathetic. But there are times when evictions are appropriate. Danielle just mentioned one. It can also be a situation where there are, you know, repetitive evictions that a person keeps getting over and over and over in their record. That might be a case where they want to object, because you don't want to just keep wiping away when someone is very likely to repeat. So I think there are valid reasons for objections, and just keep in mind that, you know, like I said, it's very early, but thus far there has not been heavy resistance against agreeing to these in appropriate circumstances.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering all of these questions and for providing your expertise in the matter. I do want to emphasize that the Utah Housing Coalition also has a training. Right now, it's just in English and Spanish that we can provide you, which is similar to what we just discussed today. And you know, it goes a little bit more in depth. It takes a little bit longer because we will answer your questions, the ones that we can. We are not lawyers, but we have, you know, we are following protocols from the court self-help webpage that they have. Utah Legal Aid also has a lot of information. That's the information that we are getting our information from. So just make sure that the information that you are getting is from confident source, just to make sure that you know what is it that you are doing. We will put our information and our contact information in our you know, presenters today on the chat for you to have it in case that you want to contact them as well. And I want to thank you today for this amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Pamela, Plessy, Danielle, and Tolina, because we wouldn't have done this without your expertise, your support, and your knowledge. And I am just so privileged to be able to work with you today.
Thank you.
Am I missing something?
No, we're good. Thank you so much. We finished right on time. Thank you for being here in the attendance. And again, Yehemi and I, we copied and pasted the questions, so we're going to get to you. Again, thank you, Plizzy, Pamela, Talina, and Danielle who already left. Also, I'm going to send everybody's contact so you can reach out to them. Thank you again. Have a good day.